Roundup's tokenization framework is the blockchain, is the tokenization of everything. Something I described, you can see my videos back in 2011, 2012, and I'm going to share with you basically the simplicity. Now that the paradigm and the technology exists, what I say to you should make a lot of sense, okay? And I'm going to explain to you also what are the missing parts. I'm Undaudu, the Sadu of Bitcoin, AI, and the blockchain. I am a storyteller. A sadhu is one who says the do, right? I am ancient. My first incarnation was Undaudu, who I wear on my chest every day. He is the founder of the Mayan civilization. He left me a Rosetta Stone that explains the different parts. So, what are the different parts we're missing? Capitalism is built on the idea of scarcity and demand for the benefit of a few, which are the shareholders. Okay, that's pretty much. There is the underlying valuation of capitalism is built on CAGR, compounded annual growth rate, which is a driver for return on investment, ROI. CAGR drives ROI. So the equation is really simple, right? You look at the compounded annual growth rate, you project that, that's your potential ROI that gets investors to invest in your widget, whatever it is, okay? In this process, there's something known as the chasm. And probably one of the best examples of crossing the chasm came with Amazon, and for many years, in debt, crossing this chasm, which meant they had to keep injecting money, and all the metrics were saying they were going to capture this market cap, right? This market, but they had to infuse all these billions of dollars into the process of doing it. So back in 2000 and around 2010, I said, well, can we simplify the startup? Because the startup ultimately, you first have to define a startup, and there are three kinds of startups. There's the pre-seed startup, has no accredited investors, just has friends and family, have you putting your money in. Pre-seed, right? The seed is what's known as a seed startup, and a seed startup is one that has accredited investors. Sorry. Down. And finally, there's the seeded. You've gotten past your early investor stage, and you've got these accredited. And I realized gatekeeper. Everything is a gatekeeper. So I said to myself, how would I envision a world without these gatekeepers, without these individuals deciding whether you succeed or fail? Giving you access to these what I call closed capital networks. And you could say, for example, that in our current Capitalism 1.0 paradigm, success equals access to closed capital networks. So if you have the ability to access closed capital networks, and you can just keep pivoting, that's the lean startup, then ultimately you can succeed. It's that simple, just pivot. Like you would know that YouTube was started off as a dating site, right? It was dating, right? PayPal started off as, I can't remember, wasn't what it was. It was completely different than what it was. And they pivoted. Everything pivoted. And a lot of things are that way. Pivot to success. So I want you to imagine a world now, ultimately, that doesn't have any shareholders. Instead of a stakeholder. What's a stakeholder? A stakeholder is a consumer, is a collaborator, or a creator of a widget. That's it. That's a stakeholder. And the participation of these stakeholders earns, kind of like, think of Bitcoin, earns these tokens that expire in 10 years. So you have 10 years to take an idea to its conclusion. It's not really conclusion, but to market, idea to market, 10 years, if you have 10 years. Even if it's a very advanced idea way ahead of the time, 10 years, that paradigm is going to reach. There's really no one has No one has ideas of technology more than 10 years in advance in their brain or anything else. 5 years is even a stretch, but 10 years is definitely a barrier. So, and I'll explain to you, you don't lose your tokens at the end of 10 years. At the end of 10 years, the entity, the found up, right, not a startup, the found up becomes a self-driving DAC, decentralized autonomous corporation or organization, DAO, right? What I called back in 2011, you look at my videos, as open corporations or open organizations. And these were tokenized entities that were self-driven, managed by AI. There you can see where the AI comes in. And the AI ultimately is not only rating the stakeholder, so there's different levels of a consumer, right? There's a consumer that is loyal, there's a consumer that was just kind of the drive-by, and there's a consumer which is kind of sometimes, right? Oh, there's actually like 7 levels of consumer. That'd be 7. Um, and the algorithm ultimately is rating the consumer and allocating tokens out of a pool. So I want you to think of an airdrop, right? So you launch a found up, it automatically creates a token, a mass of tokens, kind of like Bitcoin. It creates these tokens. They are not allocated to the founder or the creator. They're held in escrow, so to speak, right? And these tokens are held in escrow and allocated over a 10-year period based on a drip. So they drip down into a pool of tokens, and then that pool of tokens is shared amongst the stakeholders based on how that found up is set up and how the stakeholders decide on that found up. Obviously, initially, the creator has a lot more say on how it's set up. He's the initial one, but over time, that that code, so to speak, can be modified. So one of the things that is missing is the ability to very easily, simply create a token that fits in this diagram. I create a token, it drips to a pool, that pool then allocates to the stakeholders via an app, via the QR codes of purchasing, buying, participating with it. So I want to use an example. So imagine if Burt Bees was launched as a found up, or Microsoft, or Facebook, or all these things that had early beginnings, or even Google, right, launched as a found up, or even, let's say, Amazon. And and those early Amazon, creators, those early Amazon collaborators and consumers would have earned a greater amount of the token pool because there'd been less of a divide. As that market share grows, so does the divide. Now, here's an important part. Tokens, the amount of tokens you hold does not give you voting rights like shares. Shares, the more shares you hold, and this is one of the biggest mistakes that we think of, the more shares you hold in the traditional capitalism market, the more of the voting rights you have. So you have control. In a found up, in the what I call social beneficial capitalism model, SOCAP, right? SOCAPism.com. You can go read my paper. Basically, what it does is it provides everyone, every single person who is a real person with a vote. Now, here's the cool thing. There's technology called like TrueSauna.com. TrueSauna is technology that verifies an individual, and they've had it around for quite a while now. It's out there that actually verifies. So we have that verification process. Now, everyone who is verified gets a vote. And and depending on how the organization is set up, the entity, right, the widget is set up, these voting rights are done, or just based on the code. So as a creator, you can set up what different things you can vote on. But for the most part, imagine you have an entity that you could say, if you want, for example, your leadership to always change, you could say that leadership requires a majority vote or even 2/3 vote of support of the stakeholders in order to continue, right? You can set up automatic elections on it. You could set up, all these different things, just like we have in democracy. You can apply to it, and you can even set up where the change of these laws can happen. You could, if you want to be like, you never want these rules to change, you could say you need a 100% vote on changing these laws. And within a DAO or DAC, there are what I call the hard and the soft code. You have the articles and bylaws, right? The articles are the ones that either require 2/3 requirement of support. And in order for articles, for example, to be modified, you have to have a stakeholder base, of actual stakeholder base of 15,000 people. Why is that? Because it's easy for a young organization to be hijacked. Until you have that base support foundation, there's a lot of research out there on that. You don't want to have it where a few people can hijack the entity. Or you could say it requires a 100% vote to change it. I mean, everyone has to agree, like you ever get that to happen, right? Or maybe until then, and once you have 1,000, it's 100% agreement, and then when you have 15,000, it's 2/3. Whatever, you can modify it. So for social beneficial capitalism to happen, we just need a simple app. And I've described the app. You can see what I'm doing right now is hoping that I can get this app built and tested in Japan, using the Japan agriculture, which is community farming. If we can get farmers to tokenize their widgets, what is a farmer's widget? Farmer's widget is the shit they grow, right? If we can get the farmers to tokenize their widget, then ultimately, we can test this. And imagine then a grower like tomatoes or whatever farmer, they naturally become these DAOs in the future, running autonomous tractors on rice fields. All these different things happen on in Japan. So, and Japan has that kind of grassroots network, which has the power of the people when it comes to agriculture. So that's what I'm working on. So capitalism is ended. We have the technology, we have the AI, we have the blockchain. These things would just piggyback on existing blockchains. So you don't need to create a new blockchain for it. It can happen on any blockchain, on Cardano, Ethereum, whatever. It doesn't matter. And here is one of the key things is I talked about the chasm, right? How does crossing the chasm happen? How do you generate enough? Well, this is where AI and what I call the Bitcoin Vault, or the what's called Bitcoin Standard. So in this framework, right, the stakeholder, also one of the stakeholders, part of the creator, is the network and the vault. And the vault shares 20% of 20% always of all tokens. And when these tokens get to a certain value, and how is determined by the value, it's like the same thing with Bitcoin. When someone purchases a pizza, all of a sudden that thing has value. And at that point, the vault autonomously, right, starts to auction off its holdings at a specific rate. That means that those holdings would ultimately deplete in a 10-year period or whatever, 5-year period, 6-year period, whatever. And what it's doing is auctioning off these tokens and storing Bitcoin. So I want you just to imagine now you have this algorithm, right? This autonomous escrow account, allowing anyone to create tokens. These tokens gain in value. I'd say 90% will gain in value, or 10% will gain in value, right? Or maybe 5%. Let's say just 5%. We'll use the 5. 5% will gain in value. The rest of them will kind of, will linger. People will come and, come. And those people buying into these tokens and other things, and we're talking about millions of tokens here, with 5%, so 500,000 tokens. What happens is I mean, imagine all these Satoshi just kind of pouring into this account. And the key is the escrow never releases these Bitcoins. So it captures the Bitcoins, and what is it doing? It's underwriting just as gold does. You don't get access to the gold in Fort Knox. The gold underwrites and gives value to that currency, or it did when it was the gold standard. Some people want to go back to the gold standard. So this would happen. This would be the same thing, right? This would be the same thing. Let's see. On there. All right. Oh shit! Where am I gonna park? Well, I guess I'll park here. This is my boss. He's upset with me. I walked out yesterday. Trying to get it where that car can get out. All right. Anyway, that's it. I got to go to work. All right. It's end.